There is an ancient teaching that speaks of the law of action and consequence. It says that nothing in the universe happens in isolation. A leaf does not fall without the wind. The wind does not blow without the temperature, and the temperature does not shift without the sun. Likewise, no act of force exists without its echo. What Israel has experienced in the recent strike from Iran is not simply a countermeasure. It is the unavoidable echo of choices that have been made year after year, strategy after strategy. The world of politics often distracts us with numbers, with timelines, with surface-level justifications, but beneath the strategies of defense lies something more profound: the rhythm of cause and effect. The most dangerous fear a nation can possess is the belief that it can escape this rhythm. The most dangerous fear a nation can possess is the belief that it can escape this rhythm. The most dangerous fear a nation can possess is the belief that it can escape this rhythm. The most dangerous fear a nation can possess is the belief Israel, a nation shaped by survival, has built its strength upon a foundation of preemption. Strike before being struck. See danger before it arrives. Eliminate the threat before it grows. And for many years, this mindset delivered results, at least on the surface. Operations were executed, threats were neutralized, the illusion of control was maintained. But such a way of living, whether for a nation or an individual, comes at a cost. Because every time one reaches into the unknown and tries to shape it with force, they awaken the very energies they wish to suppress. This is not philosophy, this is life's mechanism. And now the strike from Iran has become the turning point where effect answers back to cause. What changed is not just the tactical reality. What changed is perception. Israel's fear was never solely about weapons falling from the sky. It was about losing the psychological edge, the silent agreement between itself and its adversaries that it will always dominate the timeline, always have the final move. But Iran's strike shattered that illusion. It declared that dominance is not a permanent seat. It is a borrowed throne, and if you rest too long upon it, someone will come to collect. The fear that emerged within Israel after this strike is not only military, it is existential. It is not only military, it is existential, because when the enemy no longer waits, no longer calculates in silence, no longer fears consequences, then the game has changed. And fear in its purest form always emerges when control slips from the fingers. We often think of fear as something that belongs to the weak. But fear is most potent in the powerful when they feel the weight of what they might lose. Israel's arsenal is vast, its technology cutting edge, and its defense systems among the best in the world. But no missile defense system can protect against the shattering of certainty. And that is what has occurred. A certainty has broken, a rhythm has shifted. Now the consequences have begun to manifest, not as distant threats, but as real physical reminders that force wakens force. And the one who strikes must eventually face the hand that reaches back. In martial discipline, there is a lesson that says if your actions are not rooted in balance, then every step forward is also a step toward your own undoing. A fighter who is too eager to strike, who loses patience and harmony, always exposes a weakness. And this moment, this strike, has exposed a weakness. Not of armor or defense grids, but of mindset. The mindset that believes power without balance is sustainable. The mindset that forgets every strike writes its own reply in the future. When Iran chose to strike, it wasn't simply responding to Israel's actions. It was responding to years of provocation, years of tension, years of living under the weight of threats, surveillance, sabotage, and pressure. Whether justified or not is not the point. The point is this: no pressure remains one-sided forever. Eventually, the pressed pushes back. The pressure remains one-sided forever. Eventually, the pressed pushes back. And when that moment comes, it is not chaos, it is balanced returning. What now follows is a period of reckoning, not of revenge, but of recognition. Recognition that the old way, the path of force without limit, of control without compassion, has shown its weakness. The adversary has spoken not just with missiles, but with a message. We are no longer silent. And in this, Israel faces its greatest fear: the realization that its dominance has awakened a new level of resistance, that its calculated actions have crossed an unseen threshold, and now what rises to meet it is not simply retaliation, but a force that has accepted pain, risk, and consequence as the price of being heard. The wisdom of the ancients teaches that the storm is not the enemy. The enemy is the unawareness of the storm's signs. The clouds, the wind, the silence before it strikes. These are warnings given by the universe. And when ignored, the storm does not punish, it simply arrives. The strike from Iran is the storm that Israel has watched grow for years. It is not sudden, it is not without signs, it is the manifestation of every decision that dismissed the voices calling for reflection, for restraint, for re-evaluation. And now, those voices have transformed into action. What happens next is not written. It will depend on who listens. So, the storm has not written. It will depend on who listens, not who retaliates, not who speaks the loudest, but who listens. Because listening allows stillness. Stillness allows clarity, and clarity prevents the next unnecessary blow. The challenge is whether leadership, both political and military, can embrace this stillness in the midst of noise. Whether they can pause long enough to see that force brought them here, but force cannot take them forward. That what was once power is now a path with new consequences, and the way out is not with more fire, but with wisdom that walks lightly, with awareness of each step. This is a pivotal moment not only for Israel and Iran, but for the entire region. Because when two ancient rivers flood, the entire landscape changes. The fear that once belonged to Israel has now become a shared realization that the world has entered a phase where past actions can no longer be buried. They return, they rise, and they knock on the doors of those who thought they could control the tide. Israel's greatest fear has come true, not because it was attacked, but because it was reminded that power is never absolute, and that the echo of every action will one day return, not as punishment, but as reflection. There is a certain comfort that comes from believing one is in control. The comfort of knowing that surveillance is constant, intelligence is precise, and defenses are impenetrable. For Israel, this belief in dominance has long been the cornerstone of its security doctrine. With decades of technological advancement, unmatched military preparedness, and strategic alliances, it crafted a reality in which any threat could be calculated, managed, or neutralized. So, with infinite care, they set up their system of calculated, managed, or neutralized. So, with infinite care that could be calculated, managed, or neutralized. But such a reality, when examined deeply, reveals itself to be a fragile illusion, because no fortress, no matter how high or how well guarded, can protect a nation from the consequences of misunderstanding the very nature of true security. When Iran launched its retaliatory strike, it did more than fire missiles. It pierced the illusion that peace could be maintained through supremacy alone. It reminded the world that security is not sustained through domination, it is cultivated through wisdom, restraint, and balance. For many leaders and nations, dominance has become a desirable mask. It disguises fear, projects strength, and silences dissent. But masks, no matter how convincing, cannot change the face beneath them. The belief that overwhelming force can substitute for lasting peace is a misunderstanding of the very principles that govern life. Force may produce silence, but it rarely produces harmony. And when silence is enforced rather than chosen, it becomes the breeding ground for deeper resistance. What Israel now realizes is that its greatest adversary may not be Iran's arsenal, but the awakening of a mindset that has moved beyond fear, a mindset that has chosen to endure sacrifice, not out of desperation, but out of conviction. This is a fundamental shift. When a people are no longer afraid of consequence, their actions are no longer constrained by conventional deterrence. And when that happens, the entire equation of power changes. Iran's strike sent a clear message. We are not negotiating from fear, we are responding from principle. Whether one agrees with the action or not, the clarity of intent cannot be denied. And this clarity is unsettling for a nation that has relied heavily on the fear of its deterrent capabilities. Yeah. Consistently in the case now that fear is eroding, now a new reality is forming. One in which deterrence must share space with dialogue, and force must make room for foresight. Because when both sides are willing to absorb pain, neither side can claim absolute advantage. In such a world, the old definitions of victory no longer apply. Victory is not in silencing the other, but in preventing the need for silence at all. In the martial path, we are taught that true power is not the ability to strike hard, but the ability to know when not to strike. It is the power to hold, to wait, to observe, to recognize the difference between motion and progress. A warrior who fights without understanding the spirit of the conflict becomes a destroyer, not a protector. In the same way, a nation that relies solely on dominance loses the clarity to discern when it has crossed from defense into provocation. The problem here is the problem to discern when it has crossed from defense into provocation. In the same way, a nation that relies solely on dominance loses the clarity to discern when it has crossed from defense into provocation. In the same way, a nation and when that clarity is lost, it creates a chain of actions that can no longer be reversed by weapons. Only wisdom can untangle that chain. But wisdom, by nature, cannot be summoned in panic. It must be cultivated over time through reflection and humility. Israel's situation now demands that very humility. Not humiliation, but humility. The strength to recognize that perhaps the path of preemption, of silencing threats rather than addressing causes, has brought it to a place where its most advanced systems cannot guarantee peace. Because peace is not born from the absence of conflict. It is born from the presence of mutual respect. And respect cannot be demanded through force. It must be earned through conduct, through the willingness to listen, to acknowledge, to understand even the voices that challenge one's own narrative. The fear that now grips Israel is not only a military concern. It is psychological, even spiritual. It is the fear that perhaps its assumptions have become outdated, its methods less effective, its dominance longer unquestioned. And in that realization lies the seed of transformation, if it chooses to see it. Because every moment of crisis holds within it the potential for awakening. If one can set aside ego and instead of asking, how do we strike back, begins to ask, what have we missed? What have we misunderstood? What is the lesson beneath this fire? The greatest shift that can occur now is not a shift in battlefield strategy. It is a shift in consciousness. A move from the belief that peace can be enforced to the understanding that peace must be invited. The shift is a shift in consciousness. A move from the belief that peace can be enforced to the understanding that peace must be invited. To the understanding that peace must be invited, that peace must be invited, that peace must be invited, that peace must not through weakness, but through courage, the courage to speak before the silence of war returns, the courage to admit that the old way has limits, and the courage to step into unfamiliar ground, the ground of cooperation, of diplomacy, of humanity. When Iran struck, it changed more than physical targets. It changed the atmosphere of certainty. It disrupted the belief that force always prevails. And in doing so, it opened a doorway. A narrow one, yes, but a doorway nonetheless. A doorway through which both nations could begin to walk differently, not as conquerors, but as caretakers of their people's future. To walk through that doorway requires leaders who are not only intelligent, but wise. Not only brave in battle, but brave in stillness. Brave enough to pursue a peace that is not purchased through fear, but forged through mutual recognition. The doorway is not purchased through fear, but forged through mutual recognition. Because in the end, no nation, no matter how strong, can build walls high enough to protect itself from the consequences of ignoring wisdom. Weapons can destroy threats, but only wisdom can dissolve them. Dominance can suppress fire, but only balance can extinguish it. Israel's greatest fear came true not because Iran retaliated, but because that retaliation revealed that control is not the same as peace. Israel's greatest fear came true not because that retaliation revealed that control is not the same as peace. That no amount of surveillance can replace understanding, and that in a world where everyone can strike, the real question becomes, who will choose not to? This is the moment where transformation is possible, where the path of dominance can give way to the path of discipline, not in the sense of military drills, but in the sense of inner clarity. The clarity to know that real security is not achieved when others are afraid, but when others no longer feel the need to strike. That is the peace worth pursuing, and that peace begins not on the battlefield, but in the decision to no longer define strength as the power to destroy, but as the power to choose a wiser way.